looking forward to the day. I anticipate I'm going to be learning a lot from many of you here in the room. I think this is a great topic. I think it's a great topic for a conference. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about labor market trends in New England. I want to mention that, in addition, I guess the title here is Vice President Economist, but also the Director of the New England Public Policy Center here at the Federal Reserve Bank. And the NEPPC actually has a long-standing interest in the economics of higher education and how higher education affects the region. So we have a very recent report by Robert Clifford on student debt and delinquency in the New England region. A number of other reports by our former colleague Alicia Sasson-Modestino looking at the retention of college grads and labor market mismatch, especially in the middle skills area in the New England economy. We feel a natural affinity with NEBI, and that both the Boston Fed and NEBI are maybe the two main policy groups that serve the entire New England region. There are a lot of policy sectors that serve one state or another, but really NEBI and the Boston Fed, I think, have the market cornered in terms of serving New England, so we feel that they're natural partners for that reason, and also because we're both very concerned about the higher education in New England and labor quality of workers and opportunities for young people in New England. So what I'm going to do is just go through some of the labor market trends in New England. So the main trend will be that, you may remember we had a pretty bad recession a few years ago. And, we've had, and the recession actually has been over for over 5 years now. It doesn't really feel like it's been over for 5 years. And the reason is that economists state the end of a recession as the point where economic activity starts to turn around. After a really deep recession, when unemployment has risen and employment has dropped, GDP growth has been negative, the point at which it turns around is the low point of the economic cycle. And so the expansion started at a time when things just felt really awful. And so that was, over 5 years ago. Since then, even though the expansion hasn't been as quick as we would have liked, it's been pretty steady. So this graph shows employment growth measured in business establishments in the U.S. and each of the New England states is indexed equal to 1.0 for its peak early on in the recession. And what you can see is that it fell dramatically. Rhode Island was the hardest hit. That's that kind of light blue line at the bottom. Now the northern New England is above that 1.0 line. Actually, not all of northern New England. Maine is still below. Maine, Connecticut, and Rhode Island are still a little below that 1.0 line, indicating that even though unemployment rates have come down in those states, employment hasn't fully rebounded. Massachusetts is interesting here. That's the kind of dark blue or purplish line. Notice that in the earlier dot-com recession, Massachusetts was hammered. And that makes sense in retrospect in that we had a lot of tech employment here when the dot-com bubble burst. A lot of that disappeared. At the time of the financial crisis that kicked off the Great Recession, Massachusetts still hadn't recovered all those jobs that were lost in the previous recession. In contrast, in the recent expansion, Massachusetts has been really fast out of the starting blocks, in that it was the first of the New England states to exceed its pre-recession employment and actually has had very robust employment growth. I think I hit the wrong button. Okay. I just skipped over a slide on unemployment. Essentially, the additional employment going up, unemployment rate has come down, and naturally it's at 5%, which is getting close to the level where we think the economy should be, where inflation isn't going to be either accelerating or deaccelerating. In New England, the unemployment rate is substantially low. It's 4.2%. New Hampshire is at 3.0%. So overall, unemployment's come down a lot. In Rhode Island and Connecticut, it's still a little bit of a problem. It's at 5.6% there, and so it hasn't come down to the national level. This graph shows initial claims for unemployment insurance benefits, which is a good indicator of the extent to which workers are being laid off from their jobs. So again, it's indexed to 1.0 this time for January 2005, before the financial crisis. And you can see that, Claims for unemployment insurance benefits skyrocketed during the recession, peaked a little bit, toward the end of the recession, a little bit afterward, because unemployment tends to be a lagging indicator of economic activity. Since then, claims for new unemployment insurance benefits have plummeted. They're now below where they were at the start of the Great Recession. Other indicators we have of layoffs also indicate, and terminations, indicate that those have come down a lot. And actually, the kind of layoffs fell pretty rapidly after the recession ended. The thing that was slow was for hiring to resume. A lot of people end up being unemployed for unusually long periods of time. If we look at a broader level of unemployment, this is the usual unemployment rate reported is called the U3 rate by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. A broader measure is called U6. And U6 includes not only those who are officially unemployed, in other words, people aren't employed but actively looking for work, but also people who are not employed, aren't actively looking for work, so they can't be counted as officially unemployed in the usual measure, but also people who have expressed a desire to have a job if it was available, and have actively searched for work sometime in the last year, although not very recently. It also includes people who are part-time for economic reasons. In other words, people who would like to have a full-time job but haven't been able to find one, so they're going to part-time employment. Now that measure went up a lot during the Great Recession. You see, during that stated period, it's come down, but it hasn't come down all the way to where it was before the Great Recession. So even though people have regained jobs, they haven't necessarily regained the types of jobs they'd like to have. And so right now, we show all the New England states has come down. It tends to be lower in New England than the U.S. The U.S. is 5.0 for the, wrong figures. For U.S. it's 9.7, down from the key coast, 16.9%. In New England, it's a lot lower. It ranges from 7.2% New Hampshire, 11 actually, Rhode Island and Connecticut are a little above the U.S. levels. But it has come down, but not all the way. Now, this is something that Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen was here at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston on Friday speaking at a conference here, and she indicated one of the things entering into monetary policy decision-making now is a little uncertainty about remaining labor market slack. A lot of this has to do with the U6 measure. Another factor is that wages haven't been picking up the way we'd usually expect they would when the unemployment rate, U3 unemployment rate, is getting as low as it currently is. I should mention there's unemployment rates ranging from U1 to U6 in addition to U3 and U6. I like to talk about the U2 rate, but then I tend to burst out into a guitar solo, so I don't want to kind of subject you to that. And I mentioned too, I'm a former academic, like you folks, and so when I was teaching, I used to teach classes that start at 8:30 a lot of time on a regular basis. Many of you probably have experienced that. 8:30 is kind of tough to animate a crowd. You probably know that. And I think the best advice I ever got in my teaching was that one time, I said an 8:30 class where people just would not respond at all to anything I said. And one of my students came into an office hours, and he was a rhetoric major at the University of California, Davis. And I helped him understand economics. He said, return it. It helped me with my teaching style a little bit. The main thing he told me is that when I tell a joke, I should laugh or at least smile. Or I guess my delivery was a little too deadpan, so I tell a joke and people just, Okay, so moving along. So what's been happening to employment by different industrial sector? So here we have New England on the left, the U.S. on the right. The green bars are the drop in employment during the kind of recession period, the early stage of the expansion when employment was still falling in many areas. The orange bars are what's happened since then to employment. So I want to point out a couple of different areas here. One is look at education and health services. Both nationally in New England, education and health services is the only one of these super sectors of employment that actually grew, that increased employment during the recession. This continues a long-running trend of increasing employment share in education and health services. That matters to everyone in this room because, one, you're part of that sector, and two, that's a sector that's very education intensive. The people working in that sector need high levels of education. Another thing to point out is manufacturing. In New England, manufacturing, as in the U.S., fell off precipitously during the Great Recession. New England has continued to fall a little bit during that expansion period overall, though it's, recently I think it's picked up a bit. The decline in manufacturing in New England goes back decades. So actually, the year in which the highest level of manufacturing production worker employment was measured in New England was 1919, almost 100 years ago. The early stages of deindustrialization in New England had to do with the closing down of textile mills, other old line industries like leather and shoe manufacturing also were huge in New England 100 years ago. They're almost gone now. What remains in manufacturing in New England tends to be very high-tech, high-value-added manufacturing. That type of manufacturing demands workers who are highly skilled and educated. If we look at unemployment by educational attainment, we can see that while college grads, that's the bottom line in green, did experience an uptick in unemployment during the Great Recession, it wasn't as severe as that experienced by people with lower levels of educational attainment. So the peak level of unemployment for college grads, this is for four-year college grads, was 5%. The unemployment rate now is down to 2.5%. Contrast that with people who do not have a high school degree or GED, the top line, that peaked at 15.6% and now is at 8.5%. So even though I think we all have friends who have advanced degrees who experienced unemployment during the Great Recession, both neighbors and family members who did, it was really hard for them. But people with higher education, high degrees of educational attainment, fared much better. That's a general cyclical pattern. While college grads can experience unemployment, they're less likely to. Turns out that's mostly from having a much lower rate of job termination than people with lower levels of educational attainment. Once people are unemployed, college grads take a long time to find jobs, as do other people in the economy, but they're less likely to be laid off. Okay, so here we have national figures for median weekly earnings on the left-hand side by level of educational attainment, and the national unemployment rate in 2015, again by levels of educational attainment. And this just reinforces on a more detailed level what we saw on the previous slide. The higher your level of educational attainment, the lower the unemployment rate is. And so again, while people in this room could suffer a spell of unemployment, we're much less likely to than people who are less well educated. Our earnings are also on average much higher than people with lower levels of educational attainment. Median weekly earnings increases monotonically. One goes from less than high school diploma to professional degree. Some of us can overshot it though. So if you got a PhD, you have a professional degree, I can say maybe that's higher education, but might debate that. But your median weekly earnings actually would be a little lower. Then again, those with us with PhDs, I really enjoy our work, so we're being compensated in non-monetary terms. That's what I tell myself. Okay, so now you want to look at what is educational attainment like in New England compared to the US. So here in the leftmost bars, we have national figures. The one after that is for New England as a whole. We have those dashed horizontal lines that correspond to the different levels of educational attainment, the kind of percentage of people over age 25 in the US who have that level of educational attainment. So starting at the bottom part, those are people who have graduate professional degrees, and we can see New England has a higher percentage than the US as a whole. We move up, we add in people who have a four-year college degree, and again, New England has a significant advantage. Notice that the percentage of people in New England who have a bachelor's degree or higher equals the percentage nationally for people who have associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a graduate degree. So New England has a distinct advantage there. We continue, the percentage of people who have some college but no degree is considerably smaller than for the nation. So we actually have with people, higher percentage were degree completers. And then if we add in the top of our high school grads, we see the difference, what's not filled in between 100%. And the top of the orange bar would be people who lack a high school degree or GED, and again, New England has an advantage. So here I think this graph highlights that the importance economic competitive advantage that New England has relative to other parts of the country is our workers. It's our human capital. That's the thing that makes us stand out. We have a highly educated workforce. I'm not saying we should rest on our laurels and accept that it can't get better, but that's the thing that makes us stand out. In terms of economic geography and what we know about why firms located in one region rather than another, firms are often attracted to an area by its workforce. So a company that has a new business establishment, it's located in a business establishment that needs a highly educated workforce will find New England to be a very attractive area to locate. Karen, how am I doing for time? I'm up. Okay. So I'm going to pull the slides. I'm going to kind of click through and say, if we look at 25 to 34-year-olds, again, these are young people that holds up. If we look at 25 to 34-year-olds, compare women, left bars to men, right bars, we find that the women are more highly educated than the men. This is just 40 degrees or higher, or high school grads, or plus people with some college, including associate's degrees. That's true in every New England state as well as nationally. That's an issue. So young men aren't attaining the same education credentials as young women. If we compare what's happened to those 25, 34-year-olds in 2015 compared to 10 years earlier, there's been a marked improvement in educational attainment. That's true in the U.S. as well as in the New England states. So again, the left bars are 2005, the right in 2015. Carolyn, I'm going fast, so don't get too concerned, please. And so this just shows that one of the kind of, there aren't many benefits associated with Great Recession. One is that young people are much more likely to stay in school, and so there's a little bit of a silver lining, I think, in the recession. If we compare those 25 to 34-year-olds with 45 to 64-year-olds, the 25 to 34-year-olds are better educated on average than the 45 to 64-year-olds. So, the 45 to 64-year-olds I refer to as mature workers. We know what that's a euphemism for. This includes the baby boom who are approaching retirement. As baby boomers retire, replaced by kind of younger people into the labor market, will generally have an educational upgrade into the labor force. Finally, this will be the last slide. I looked at the 25 to 34-year-olds in 2005 compared to the 35 to 44-year-olds in 2015. The reason I did this is to look at whether New England's advantage in educational attainment is partly due to people coming here for school, where we export educational services from students coming from outside the region, going to school here, and whether that would dissipate if people left the region following degree attainment. So this cohort analysis combines these kind of migration effects with also an effect of some older students, the non-traditional students over over the 25 to 34-year-old age range, continuing school after 2005. What we find actually is that both the United States and New England, there's actually somewhat of an increase in educational attainment for that cohort over time, suggesting that continuing in school effect dominates whatever migration effect might be affecting New England's labor force. So sorry to run over. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you. Okay, so Mike, I thought it was out of time totally, but Michael said that we can take a couple questions if anybody has one. Yes, sir.
You did the slide on the comparative college degrees of women and men, where women have higher rates of graduation than men. What about earnings? That's a good question. So as you know, there's a gap between earnings of men versus women, where men tend to be higher paid. Whether that holds true for college-educated men in the youngest cohort relative to women, or what degree is true, I'm not entirely sure. But thanks for bringing that up. That despite the kind of women being more likely to complete a post-secondary degree, the earnings gap is a significant problem. So thanks for that. Any other questions?
Here.
Yes.
The workforce is getting older. People are staying in their jobs a lot longer. How are we factoring that?
So actually, in my talk, I didn't factor that in at all, but you're right, that's an important point. I would have gone even more over time if I was talking about kind of the demographics of aging. So that cohort that's approaching retirement is very large relative to the cohorts that are in the labor market. And so that is something that's going to create pressures in the labor market. It's something that's affecting New England a bit more than the rest of the country. But commonly that is the increase in kind of labor quality from the more highly educated workforce. So hopefully that will carry us through. Yes?
In terms of the competition 10 years, 15 years from now, people with a high school diploma or even that associate, peers basically, you have a difficult time getting jobs in this region because there's so many people with much higher education than
I wouldn't completely agree with that. So I think the people who complete higher levels of educational attainment have an advantage. On the other hand, I think there are complementarities between those who say have a postgraduate degree or BA with those who have lower levels of educational attainment, because the firms need a mix of workers in their their facilities. So, and also there are different kind of service sectors that serve the companies that have very highly educated workforces. So I'm not too pessimistic about that. I think it's good for our policymakers to aim to make sure that all of the youth growing up in New England have the opportunity to go as far as they can in educational attainment, because we can see that unemployment rates there are very low. Sometimes the job matches recently in the weak labor market haven't been as good as we'd like, but people do find jobs. But I don't think I would worry. I think it's good to have high levels of educational attainment, but I wouldn't worry that jobs would be completely unavailable for those who don't, say, have, less than a 50 grade. Yes?
Do you have a perspective on the importance of educational attainment by industry?
So there are differences in educational attainment by industry. The industries in which New England specializes tend to have higher levels of educational attainment than kind of the standard national mix. And I think can view that as being endogenous, or something that's a function of the level of educational attainment. Firms that are looking for highly educated employee base tend to locate in New England. So an example would be GE deciding to locate actually they're already in New England, but before they weren't in the first district, they were in Fairfield County, Connecticut. The first Federal Reserve District was all New England except for Fairfield County. So they moved to Boston. The stated reason was because they're looking for the very highly educated workforce and the innovative environment in Boston. So I think that's something we could view their competitive advantage in attracting firms, is firms that are really looking for that highly skilled workforce. Am I out of time? Okay, good. Thank you very much.